Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Francis at GroundTruth. I am Strategic Account Executive based out of Chicago. I'm your host for the beginning part of this webinar, and today's topic is how to run a winning political campaign strategy. So before we get started, all participants are muted, but we encourage you to engage in real time within our chat. Please let us know where you're dialing from. A full recording will be sent to all registrants. Submit questions via the Q&A function throughout the session. Please share your feedback via the pulse survey during the session. And for any follow-up questions, feel free to email me, to find me on LinkedIn, to reach out to us anonymously at adexpert.com, adexpert@groundtruth.com, or connect with your GroundTruth representative, your respective representative. So let's get started, right? So as an overview today in today's agenda, we're gonna talk about GroundTruth throughout today's session. The keynote, and that'll be delivered by myself, what's happening with political marketing and why does all this stuff matter? A little later, we're gonna have a fireside chat with Mayor Ted Kozlowski, and then we're gonna wrap things up at the end with a Q&A session. So please, 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 submit your questions. All right, meet our panelists. You've met myself, again, Dimitri Konsis out of Chicago, Strategic Account Executive. A little later, we're going to be joined by Eric Carlson. He runs our platform team here at GroundTruth. He will be moderating with our panelists, Ted Kozlowski, Mayor Ted Kozlowski of Stillwater, Minnesota. And if you've never been to Stillwater, it's a quaint little town in Minnesota that is a must to go visit. Just don't jump off any bridges after today, and you'll understand that inside joke if you Google that. Ted is also founder and president of Demand Quest. It is a digital agency that specializes in political, of course, but then also specializes in a few other verticals. Ted has a lot of great anecdotes, as well as being well-versed in politics and political marketing and being an elected official. So we all look forward to that discussion. So let's talk about the political landscape just to kick things off. And why are we here? And why is everyone so excited about politics? And why is this stuff in the news constantly? We have 34 U.S. Senate seats up on November 8th. That's the election day, right? For federal, state, local candidates. In addition to that, all 435 U.S. House seats are up. A bunch of governors' chairs are up, more than half. We have many, many Secretary of State races going on in states, along with state treasurers and AG races. In addition to that legislative election, at the regional level, we have a lot of county elections happening coast to coast. We have a lot of mayoral elections on top of that, if that wasn't enough, right? In a bunch of cities across the United States, including my hometown of Chicago. In addition to that, there are two special elections happening in Florida and California for state seats. So why does all this stuff matter, right? Why does political matter? Why does this election matter? Because there's a ton that's on the line. The votes and decisions that we're going to make for our candidates who will drive policy over the next 4 and 6 years for senators is going to have a big impact on this country. There's a ton of polarization happening, as we know. A lot of heated issues happening, and that lends itself to lots of media spending. I was reading a couple of articles over the weekend, one on CNN.com, another in Bloomberg, estimating that the political spend between now and November is going to be $9 billion. $9 billion. So it's a ton of money is going to get spent, not just with candidates, but of course with candidates, but with issue money, with advocate money, and referendums. And then once that's over on November the 8th, roughly 2 years later, we're going to have a federal election for president of the United States again, with a bunch of Senate seats. A third of the Senate is always up every 2 years, right? So a bunch of elections then as well, mayoral races, statewide races, and governor races. So this seemingly will not stop over the next 2.5 years. So as marketers in general, and in particular in the political space, okay, we need to reach the right people, right, in the right channels at the right moment in order to influence and solidify behaviors and voter outcomes. So it's not just about reaching voters is the end game, but we want to reach them, the right people at the right time through the right channels in order to influence outcomes and therefore, and to win elections, right? Behaviorals are not just votes, but it could be just the idea and the notion to get up and vote, right? The voter drives that we have, money that's being spent there. So as marketers, this is our big challenge. And the challenge here really is to spend the money in the most effective way, the most efficient way. You're not spending and wasting candidate dollars. So let's talk a little bit about GroundTruth and who we are and why this is relevant. So we're an advertising company. We're actually an ad tech company that leverages physical world data to build unique audiences and target solutions for marketers. So let me dissect that a bit. Physical world data means we deal with location and visitation data. Visitation and location data that's happened in the past and that is happening currently right now. We take it, we aggregate it, we synthesize it, and then we curate it into unique audiences for advertisers to target and use. We do this across a lot of different verticals. Political is one of them, and political is one that works really well and lends itself well for it. So data is a commodity for a lot of marketers and agencies and a lot of companies. And for us, it's a commodity, but for us, visitation data is very proprietary. It is ours, it's one-to-one data. We acquire it through over 130,000 app partners that we have, and we gather that data, those raw data points, those lat lines, and we take it and we synthesize it. But we also have to make sure that it's legitimate. So we have lots of scrubbing to do here in different parts and in stages. The first being the data that comes in. Again, we have to make sure that it's legitimate, that it makes sense, and that there isn't anything inordinate about it. So that's the first step we take in the cleansing process. The second step is with place determination. We take those data points and we contextualize it against a mapping function, which I'll talk about momentarily. But that mapping function is just a map. We have to make sure that the data that's being dropped on the map is not only legitimate, but also makes sense. We have to know the difference between people that work in businesses versus people that visit businesses. People that pass by at a rather high rate of speed, or maybe they're in one location 1 minute and they're in another location, 5 minutes later, that's 40 miles away. So scrub number two. And then the third part of that would be visit determination. We have to verify that what we report in terms of visits actually happened. Now, let me pause there for a moment. For visit determination, it's a bit irrelevant for the political space because we do not track visits. I'll talk about that later as to why. But if you deal as marketers in other verticals and you've never worked with GroundTruth before, the differentiating factor with us is that we can show business post ad exposure for running an ad campaign, which is a very, very powerful mechanism that we use. GroundTruth for us is legitimate, and for a lot of advertisers it's legitimate, but so what? So we take it a couple of steps further. We are MRC accredited. That is the Media Ratings Council that looks at our data and the way we do business and legitimizes it. They are an independent entity that grade and look out for inordinances with with digital companies and their data. About a year ago, we gained accreditation. It was last July. It took us over 4 years to get that, and we're very proud of it. We are also the only location visitation company that is both MRC accredited on all three levels that you see up here, as well as being third-party audited through a company called Numerator. In addition to that, our data set includes WeatherBug. We actually own and operate the WeatherBug app. It is a terrific app for predicting weather. Please download it. It's amazing. But for us, it allows us access into proprietary first-party data, a very healthy amount of data that we can control and that we can look at very, very closely. So contextualization, right? That's a big thing. So how do we know that a data point is actually in a Costco or in a Great Clips? The secret to our sauce is Blueprints. It is a proprietary software that we use to take data points and contextualize them. The green area here that you see is in store, and we go in and we map the walls of businesses, and we then map the lot area, the orange area, and then we map it a third way by determining, well, what's the retail block if applicable. So why do we do this? Because we want to give precision data back into our pool and back to our advertisers. We want to know the difference between a Costco, who would be in the green area, and then just yards away might be a Great Clips. We want to know the difference between someone that walks into both of those areas with precision-like accuracy. So blueprints, the secret to our sauce. So we use that technology, and what's relevant in the political realm is that we have gone in and mapped all 435 United States congressional districts. We've mapped them all. In addition to that, we have blueprinted upper and lower house state districts. So what does that mean for you as marketers, right? If you have a candidate that is running for office in this type of realm, we can accurately know that someone who's getting an ad message, an impression, actually lives within that district. So you virtually have no waste. How do we know that? We know that through dwell time, and then by mapping the parcels, these addresses within that district. We draw the walls around the district, and then we can drop ads within those confines. If you're wondering, how would you create your own districts? Let's say you have a candidate that is running for alderman, and you want to define a ward, or you want to go after a particular neighborhood that might be relevant, key neighborhoods, or maybe you want to do captures of people that go on a highway because there's some referendum up. We can do custom mapping as well to help define areas that would be relevant for your particular scenario. So targeting for marketers. So what's up with this, and how is this, a big deal? And this is really no different for people in the political realm than somebody doing, a client, right? So we have two choices now as marketers. We can go down the route of looking at content or using addressability in terms of marketing. A content play would be, you have a candidate, you go to the local rock station because it aligns with this candidate's beliefs, right? And you're running a bunch of ads on that rock station, or you're running ads on morning news or an evening news because you believe that for this candidate, that is the lean in part of marketing, and people will be more susceptible to ads and lean in, and it really will grab them. And for many years, content was all we had, and that's what seemed to, seemingly worked, right? And that's where all the dollars went. But in the digital space and in the digital realm, we can just do so much better these days, and every year it gets better through addressability on mobile platforms, on desktop platforms with us, with CTV and with OTT, rather than taking your ad dollars and putting them on linear TV and on radio and hoping and praying that you reach the right constituents and the right potential voters. We can go after it from an addressability standpoint and target people like moms or potential voters or Republicans or Democrats. We can do this on a national level, of course, the statewide level and the DMA level. By the way, linear can do that too, but we could take it many, many steps further. We could do it at the city level, at the zip level, and those custom levels that I spoke about. So location-based audience targeting is something very specific now to GroundTruth, and we're going very, very broad and starting to narrow this a bit. So location-based audiences for us is we are looking at visitation and location patterns of persons and identifying who are people that are, say, Whole Food shoppers, or they might be Cabela people that tend to shop there. This could be relevant for one of your candidates. Say there are, Mayor Ted, of course, in Minnesota, a great state for outdoor activities. Cabela's is probably way more relevant for them than they would be for a lot of other states. And certain candidates might align to that type of an audience, and we have that available. Perhaps the most powerful mechanism for us, aside from congressional districts, would be targeting through audience targeting, and that is behavioral groups. We would be looking at the patterns of persons and mobile devices and starting to bucket and curate groups based on their tendencies. And from there, we can identify people that we know are moms or are in families, or maybe are millennials or are gamblers and CBD people and maybe baby boomers. So why is this relevant for you as political marketers? Let's say you have a candidate and you're constantly polling and you find out that the candidate is pouring poorly with veterans or with moms. We can sub-segment these groups and create mini ad campaigns and attack that segment in order to up the numbers and to affect outcomes. So really, really powerful tool. I don't know that I would necessarily lead with this, but if it's relevant for this particular sector or how a candidate aligns, it certainly should be included in the mix. In addition to that, we have the ability to target by ethnicity, a big, powerful tool that we have. There are over 60 million Hispanics in the United States, and all candidates are jockeying and positioning themselves for their votes and to get them to get out to vote and to vote for them, right? So we have access to that third-party data that we can pull in. In addition to that, Asian, African American, and whatever else you might desire, we do have that available through our third-party audiences. Speaking about third-party audiences, you can harness a lot of the third-party data that we have that's available. So what do I mean by that? So we're dealing with visitation data. That is our first-party data. But we do have the ability to pull outside data, third-party data in to augment strategies and to really, really pinpoint areas that you might want to attack as marketers with your candidates. Third-party data can be things like Experian, Data Axle, and Starista. We have more that we're actually adding right now, but if you're asking us, can you reach registered voters? Can you reach Republicans or Democrats or centrists or libertarians? We have ways of doing that. People that are voters or non-voters that we know have voted in the past, we can reach them in large part through these areas. If you want to reach farmers, for example, environmental people, we can do that as well. But tons of options here. In addition to that, Nation Builder and VAN, Voter Action Network, and I'll let Mayor Ted and everybody talk about that a little later in great detail. These are GOP and Democrat databases and sources that we are in process now to get onboarded with GroundTruth, and there'll be more on that later. But we're very, very excited about the potential that that brings. Geo-targeting. This is what a lot of folks consider as, you know, what are the crux of our businesses aside from our behavioral targeting. Geo-targeting is you drop a pin on an address and then you do a radius around that address. We can do that as little as 0.2 miles, but it can be 15, 20 miles. So you might find an address and say, we want to saturate this area with political ad messages for this candidate or for this issue for 20 miles and call that a day. In addition to that, you can take geo-targeting and layer that on top of our audience-based audiences as well. So you want to target moms within 5 miles around this address, for example. We can certainly do that. And the one thing also that's worth mentioning about all these tactics and strategies is, I don't know that I would ever advocate for us to go with one tactic, one solo tactic. I love using multiple tactics, depending on need and depending on the outcome that you desire. We could saturate areas, in addition, target special groups, and then just do a bunch of other things with congressional districts or special neighborhoods where maybe you're pouring poorly with your candidate. And that's what my job in large part is with GroundTruth, is to help with strategy. And there are many of us here that can help with those parts as well. So we've talked about strategies. We've talked a little bit about GroundTruth. So we are an ad platform that can also deliver ad messages, which is great. And our media channels that are at your disposal does not end with just mobile. And this is a great slide here. So we looked at a poll looking at what areas, what media seem to have the most influence on voters, and strictly a poll, right? And it's no surprise to anybody that television and radio would outpoll almost every other medium. Not quite sure if that's true, but that is the perception. But it probably is true to some extent. And why is that so? Because television has images and, you know, sights and sounds and music and can show the candidate's face. Radio is theater of the mind. They're 30, sometimes 60-second ad messages that can really get to the heart of a message and really pull on the heart, the heart with candidates and get people motivated to vote for them or to vote one way or another for the issues. If you've ever turned on TV, you know exactly what I'm talking about there, right? So problem with this is it's all content based, and you have to go after them on the fishing channel or on the golf channel or on local news or at that sports, during in-game for sports. The problem with television and radio is, as we know, as we get closer and closer to an election, we are bombarded with ads for candidates. Oftentimes they are in ad pods that can be 5, maybe 10 minutes long. It's one ad after the next, political candidate after political candidate, sometimes the same candidate, over and over and over again until that money's spent. And I truly ask every marketer out there, is this money that is best spent and most wisely spent? And it's something you really need to think about when addressability is at your fingertips. So a lot of these other media that you see here on this page, many of which are addressable, some not. Political loves direct mail. We have a solution for that as well. While it can be effective, it is something that goes in the mailbox and oftentimes does get thrown out, but again, can be highly effective if it could be curated in the right ways. So what media is at your disposal through GroundTruth? We always advocate multiple screens. Why? Because the more eyeballs, the better. The more touch points, the better. The more places that, me as a consumer, as a voter in this case, see your ad, the more sticky it's going to get. So we always advocate serving on multiple screens. So what are those screens? We do mobile devices, cell phones, right? Banner ads, video. We do CTV and OTT. CTV being the big screen in your living room, OTT, over the top, being all screens, including the big screen, but things like iPads. We've recently, we also have desktop as well, which is a completely different set of inventory. And we've recently onboarded direct mail. We've actually had it through our Addy function, but we're going to be onboarding that through Ads Manager as well. So why direct mail through us? Well, normally you would need a curated audience, a direct mail list that you would have to pay for, and those can be very costly. And you send your direct mail out, and that's the end of the day. For us, we can take these curated audience that I spoke about earlier and mail those folks. We would do a match and we would mail those folks directly to their homes with cards and pieces in their mailbox. So a pretty powerful tool. Direct mail is not going away. We know that. We just want that to be part of our mix and to offer that to all advertisers of all sizes. Addy is another platform that we own and operate that we acquired over a year ago. Within Addy, we have access to a ton of magazines and some newspapers, Condé Nast on the magazine side, where you can go in down and dirty, buy ads in that area. You can buy direct mail through there, and a lot of out of home and some other things that we're making available. But a very easy to use platform, certainly can be used for political candidates. So let's talk about QR codes, the big comeback of QR codes in the media and marketing business. And we just can't get out of the way anymore right now with QR codes. Why? Because they are incredibly effective, especially with television ads. Television, as I alluded to earlier, great for sounds, sights and sounds. Is there a ton of immediacy there? I'm not so sure, maybe. But by adding QR codes to television ads, it brings more of a call to action and some immediacy. So if you're interested in a candidate, scan this QR code, learn more about where they stand on important issues, what they're like, pictures of their family, et cetera, and a wealth of information that you could deliver into the hands of persons watching TV, right? How cool is that? In addition to that, QR codes offer a great catch-all for a lot of data on who those people are that are scanning that we can aggregate and present back to you. We can customize these QR codes to match the colors of the candidate or of the party, red or blue, usually, right? Or of that, whatever the theme is. We can use the schematic and incorporate that into these QR codes. But tons of opportunities there that we love. Again, something you would be using for CTV, OTT, not so much with mobile, maybe with desktop. So ways to work with us as GroundTruth and within Ads Manager. So full disclosure, I'm with the platform team, the self-serve platform team, as is Eric. That is where we do most of our business. You can work with us as resellers, of course. and through managed services, but through the self-serve platform, it gives you a lot of flexibility. We give you access to the platform. We train you on the platform. We can advise you on tactics and strategy and really guide you and help optimize campaigns. It's hands-on keyboard for you as marketers. You get a lot of flexibility in terms of when you create ads. You can go in at 11 o'clock at night and create a campaign and launch it within a couple of hours for one of your candidates, because everything is so last minute with political. You have the ability to do that, and there's no lag time by the time you communicate that to a rep. You can also go in and optimize and change up ad campaigns on the dime and make sure that they're working for you and giving you the desired results that you need. So there's lots of merits, and it's also cheaper. There are no minimums in terms of ad spend, and there are no fees within Ads Manager. If you choose to work through GroundTruth, through our managed services, that's okay too. You have a limited staff, for example, and you need to just get stuff done and campaigns activated as soon as possible. Again, you have limited staff. You want to send over an RFP or an avail, get this thing up and running by tomorrow, whatever the orders are in these markets across these ad group, et cetera, we can do that too. We'd be happy to work with you there. There are some minimum spend thresholds, unfortunately, there, but we certainly can work with you in that way as well. But through Ads Manager and through self-serve, through our team, we can happy to talk about that later today or offline if you wish. So oftentimes we get asked, well, what are the guardrails? What do we need to be mindful of as marketers? What can we, and what you can do, but here's what you can't do, right? So we want to ensure privacy really across the board for us in everything that we do. We just need to make sure we're on the up and up and that we're not crossing the line, so to speak. And it is really, really important in the political sector, right? But we want to ensure voter privacy, right? We don't need to know then, did somebody go to the polls and actually vote on that day or maybe for whatever candidate, right? We want to get the ad messaging out. We just don't want to cross that line. In addition to that, so we're not tracking visits. In addition to that, a lot of the polling places happen at schools and churches, which are big no-nos for us. We wouldn't track visits there to begin with. So it has a double reason for us not to track visits, post-ad exposure with political campaigns. Controversial issues and topics. I know there was some stuff in the news yesterday about Hulu, Google, and Facebook. I think everybody knows where they stand on controversial issues and topics. They don't accept ads in large part, but for us, we do accept ads. It's just that we need to toe the line here on controversial issues and topics. If you have any of those issues and topics that you're wondering about, any creative that you're wondering about, please send that to us and we will run it past legal and past executive management and make a decision on whether or not we would accept that. But just know that things like, guns rights, whether it's, abortion issues and things like that, those are just areas that we're likely not going to take campaigns for obvious reasons there. Conventions and rallies, we get often asked, hey, can we map a rally that's happening in 2 days at this park for say abortion and things like that. So, and while we do map rallies and we can do captures of devices and retarget them, when it comes to these controversial topics, again, we would just rather not and keep ourselves clean and not allow ourselves to get involved in the controversy. Conventions as well, right? Those are areas that we just don't want to acquire and keep data for any reason. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about creative guidelines, right? What is at your fingertips? Well, mobile banners, mobile video, right? We're a mobile platform, mobile video up to 30s, desktop banners, desktop video is available as well. Again, up to 30s, up to 50 megs on video that you can bring in right into Ads Manager and let it run. CTV, OTT video, it's the same video that you would be running with desktop and mobile that would appear on your big screen. And we have the ability to layer on QR code on top of that. Generally speaking, there's no charge for that through our partnership with Flowcode, although we do have some minimum requirements for QR codes. In addition to that, we have some other kind of cool mechanisms that we're using, that we're offering up with banner ads, as you see here. There's a scrolling banner message at the bottom. We call this Ad Messenger. It's a great way for people to get noticed or candidates to get noticed. It's highly effective. It's been highly popular with candidates. I recommend investigating that if it's right for your candidate. And then DAA icon is a cool thing that we are onboarding, and DAA icon is a little tag that you can put on your on these banner ads that if you click it, it links over to disclosures for candidates, right? We all run into these issues. Well, how do we get past the disclosure statements? Do we need to drive people to a website? Oftentimes it can be kind of messy and disjointed, but by putting this tag on the banner ad and allowing someone to click onto it and then take them to that area if so need to, it can satisfy regulatory issues within states and within federal laws. All right, so that's it for my part in the keynote. I will be turning over the reins to Eric Carlson. Again, he's Vice President of Platform Sales at GroundTruth, and he will be talking to Mayor Ted and getting all of his insights and anecdotes. Take it away, Eric.
Great. Dimitri, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. That was great. Hi, Eric Carlson, oversee the platform sales team at GroundTruth, and thrilled to be joined today by Ted Kozlowski. And Ted, you have such a great background and so interesting. I'd love if you jumped right in and just give an overview about yourself and what you're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, I just got back right before this this webinar from speaking with a bunch of residents at a newly built senior living facility. I'm kind of on the campaign trail right now. I'm on the ballot in November, but that said, I am running on opposed, so I think we'll be good. So not so much door knocking today. But I've been mayor for 8 years. I was the youngest mayor ever elected to the oldest town in Minnesota. Stillwater is referred to as the birthplace of Minnesota. I've been on council now for 10 years, and with this next election, assuming someone doesn't mount a massive write-in campaign, I will be tied for the longest serving mayor of the oldest town in Minnesota. So it's pretty fun. Stillwater's a beautiful spot. We've got a pretty significant reputation in Minnesota and regionally as the birthplace of Minnesota. We have the wild and scenic St. Croix River that flows through our downtown. The house that I live in and it was built in 1868. So it's an old historic river community that's only about 30 minutes from downtown Minneapolis. So we're certainly part of the metro and kind of the place where everybody brings their out-of-town guests, and it's a wonderful spot to be mayor. But like a lot of mayors of cities around 20,000, I don't get paid for that. I get about $200 a month to listen to everybody complain about things, and I enjoy every moment of it, most of them, 95% of them. So for my day job, my wife and I about 14 years ago started Demand Quest, which was really a joint venture with Google to do training on Google Analytics and Google AdWords, so specifically paid search. So we really started as kind of Google's training arm to a degree. We're the only certified Google training school on the planet. I believe we still are. And our goal really wasn't to be an agency, but we have had 5,000-6,000 students come through our various training facilities across the US, and that was all pre-COVID, of course. And with that, a lot of people raised their hands and wanted us to do this stuff for them. So we kind of unwantingly became an agency of sorts, which was kind of nice though. We got to cherry pick our clients. And so we've kind of moved into more of a training / agency where, honestly, with COVID and everything, the bulk of our revenues come from the consulting side and management side. I believe as a company, we manage between $12 and $15 million a month in digital ad budgets, the bulk of which are going to Google, Facebook, Insta, GroundTruth, and a couple other smaller, more, industry specific platforms. But on becoming mayor, and I've always been involved in politics. I worked for both the Democrats and the Republicans when I was in college in Madison. The Republicans paid a little bit better and their offices were a little bit nicer. Democrats were a little more fun to party with. And then I lived in San Francisco. I worked in Silicon Valley for almost 10 years doing sales and marketing for various security startups. And I became friends with Gavin Newsom, our governor now, and worked on his campaign, which was really fun when he ran for mayor of San Francisco. He was seen as like the most Republican conservative candidate, right? Like you could match him up against anybody in the country, and he's the most liberal person on the ballot. But in San Francisco, they like had memes of him that looked like Mr. Burns, right? It was pretty hysterical. But that was kind of the first campaign that I ever like got paid to work on. I did work for Tammy Baldwin and Russ Feingold when I was in college in Wisconsin. So I was kind of like being behind the scenes, and we would do this stuff for people we knew, family, friends, and kind of use our digital skills to help candidates. And honestly, I've worked with both Republicans and Democrats. My position as mayor of the city of Stillwater is nonpartisan, which is a wonderful thing. If you can get one of those political gigs, it's great. But it also means I have to be nice to both Republicans and Democrats. Minnesota is a fun state that's unique in that it has a bicameral legislature that's often split in terms of the Republicans control the Senate and the Dems control the representatives. And so I typically, in representing my city, have a Republican and a Democrat that I have to be friends with in order to get the state to give us the money we need to maintain this beautiful downtown and vibrant community that we have. And that's where like I have to become kind of nonpartisan in my political digital operation, and helping, really outside of a handful, mainly Minnesota candidates, several statewide races over the last decade, some House seats, some state legislature stuff, Secretary of State stuff, and others. So I've had a pretty good bit of experience, but we're not a full-time political digital operation. We do it. For those on the call that do that full-time, we all know politicians as candidates or even special interest are kind of a painful client to have, frankly, because it's a lot of fits and starts, right? Like these aren't campaigns. I work for Toro and Polaris and Michelin and a lot of large consumer product companies, and they run ads, 365, 24/7. And with politics, it's every 4 years, every 2 years, and we start it up, ramp it down, turn it off, and at the end of the day, you've got a winner or a loser. So kind of by design, it's a little more challenging on the political side than it is with most of what we do as marketers.
Being a marketer and an elected official, which is really a unique position, has one influenced the other or changed anything in terms of how you look at things? Like, has being an elected official running for office changed how you look at marketing for certain people and vice versa?
I mean, it certainly does. I don't know that my political digital experience has provided a lot of insights into the, kind of the consumer commercial side of the business, but I think it's definitely flowed the other way. And then being an elected, I have run unopposed, but I have had to knock on doors, and I've knocked on doors for other candidates. And so I think having that face-to-face experience and being kind of a figurehead in a community. I mean, we're not a huge city, we're 20,000 people, but I mean, I feel like at this point, after 10 years, I've talked to everybody at some point. Really getting to understand the voters at a very personal level. People are really passionate about the city of Stillwater. And so you really get to know them personally more than you would if you were, our state senator Klobuchar, or not state senator, our Senator Klobuchar. She can't meet everybody in Minnesota, right? I mean, where I get to, have conversations with people from, both sides of the political spectrum that are very deep, right, and personal to them. And so I feel like I have a little bit better insight than a lot of people in the political digital space, because I've had to talk to everybody, like a lot in depth, to, where I'm exhausted at the end of almost every day, like especially during a pandemic. And that helps. I think the strategies in talking to other political digital types, I think are off. And I think they could learn from some of the experiences that I've had, and also the commercial consumer side of the digital marketing business.
What do you think is what's changing this year? Would you like, everything is always evolving. So for 2022, is it the channels that people use? Is it the types of messaging that they're doing? Or what are you seeing sort of in the space right now?
I mean, I can tell you, it's certainly not getting easier to run digital for political campaigns. Facebook is excruciatingly painful right now, right? Facebook was my go-to 10 years ago when I ran my first election. It was so easy. You didn't have to upload a picture of your passport and your ID and your birth certificate. And, they didn't have to show up at your house and, all of these things to run a political ad, and all of the things that they're doing that are ultimately good to protect our privacy. I think it's good, but it's all half baked, and not like half of the stuff they're trying to do doesn't work. And so I think Facebook's going to be really frustrating for a lot of people in this election cycle. I think the amount of noise and content out there is, it's always going up. It's just much harder to filter through the fray and actually get your message heard. And so a lot of the traditional things that people did in politics just aren't as effective as they used to be. I think the big thing this year is I don't think people are going to be comfortable door knocking. I mean, coming out of a pandemic, that's always been in Minnesota, whether you're a Republican or a Dem, the bread and butter campaign strategy is door knocking. And frankly, I don't think people are comfortable with that right now. I don't think volunteers are going to be comfortable with that. I don't think the residents are going to be comfortable with that. And so that's kind of a big pillar that is going to be kind of pulled out of our arsenal with this cycle. It certainly was for the last one. I think targeting and using platforms like GroundTruth, and I don't work for GroundTruth. GroundTruth doesn't pay me, right? But I use the tool. I've been using it now for about a year. Having targeting, the specific targeting that platforms like GroundTruth and Google bring to the table, I think are just more important now than they ever have been before. You have to rely on different data sets. You can't just use the van. You can't use the voter files. You can't just use, one platform to find the voters and move the needle. I think you've got to take a more commercial approach to reaching out to people than this kind of highly targeted, labor intense door knocking mail, approach using the van that candidates had used in the past. I don't think that's going to be as effective as it used to be.
Does the list that Dimitri showed earlier, when it showed television to be the most used and what viewed as most influential and direct mail, et cetera, does that ring true to you, do you think, as well?
I don't know. I saw that slide, and I'm kind of a survey snob. I did Internet Gallup when I was in college, and so I don't know. I think that maybe the answers to that might be I don't know. I don't think the TV. I mean, it didn't really show the impact of. I've had candidates that have completely turned their TV budget into digital, and have done very little TV. And I think the most efficient spend of dollars in a campaign are going to be on digital. Of course, you could say I'm biased because that's the world I live in. I've got the big Google sign behind me. But I can see dollar for dollar, penny for penny, you're going to reach more people in a more effective way where those people live across digital platforms, which include TV. I mean, I think a lot of people would say this is a TV. And so looking at that survey question, I think a lot of people watch their news here. I also think a lot of people don't want to admit that they're influenced by ads on Facebook, right? I mean, no one wants to admit they're influenced by ads. And so, TV's tough. I mean, especially with smaller races, and Secretary of State's not going to run a TV campaign, really. I mean, maybe a small one. And so, is it seen as important by some according to that survey? Sure, of course it is. But I think there's some other mediums that are probably a lot more influential, certainly more effective or more efficient from a spend standpoint.
From a marketing standpoint too, is there something where does breaking out of the norm, is that something that you think works and that you recommend when possible? Or is it more like, well, everyone's doing this, so I should do it too?
I mean, I think the general consensus is everybody does this and this is what we're going to do. And it's not to, and I've talked to loads of, professional digital political operatives, and frankly, I don't agree with them. I'm not saying what we've always done, whether you're on the Dem or Republican side, isn't effective anymore, but I would add a few more arrows to the quiver, right? Like, I'm not saying transition all of your budget out of, traditional and door knocking and TV and put it into digital, but I think you have to be a little more creative, like in Minnesota, everybody, the Democrats and Republicans, it's all about getting people out to vote, right? GOTV campaign, GOTV, if everybody just shows up and votes, I'm going to win, right? Well, we had the highest voter turnout in the US in the 2020 election at 80%. Like, you're not going to, like, everybody votes already, right? So it's finding that 20% of people in the middle. And I think that's where your strategy with relying on, Nation Builder or the van, you're going to miss that really important segment of people that you don't have good door knocking info on, you don't have their leanings accurate. Like, those are the people I want to move. And frankly, like, it's easier to target all of them and the van than just targeting the van. It's like, it's more cost effective to use tools like Google and GroundTruth than using the van providers and their tools. You can target all of those people plus some for less CPM dollars personally, and you can move the needle. I mean, one of my favorite things is we beat, and when Mark Dayton was running for governor, and he was wildly popular and he won. But during that election, I had statewide candidates that beat Dayton in very Republican leaning districts in northern Minnesota, because we were frankly running ads for Dems on Fox News. Everybody thought we were out of our mind. I was running ads for Democrats on Breitbart, and the candidates were losing their minds, but we got insane engagement out of those ads. And for whatever reason, they beat Dayton, who was more popular than him than these candidates statewide, but we beat them in Republican districts. Almost in the one case, it was double digits. It was 10 or 11%. So, I've got data that proves that it works, right? I mean, it's, not to say you go all in on that, but I think, relying on that content driven structure that Dimitri alluded to, yes, it will work. It does have value. It's not throw everything out, but I think you've got to be more creative right now. There's so much garbage out there. If you don't have good targeting and a good platform, you're never going to be able to reach those people in any measurable way. Showing one ad impression to one person over 30 days isn't going to do it. You've got to have tight targeting, tight ad groups, and you've got to pound people over the head with a message across all sorts of different content, a lot of which you might not agree with personally as a candidate or as an issue or any of those things.
No, it's a good point. It also goes back to what Dimitri was speaking to as well, in terms of using multiple strategies simultaneously. Don't rely on one thing, mix it up, utilize a lot of different things simultaneously for the greater overall impact as well. You had an interesting story that you had shared, I think, about just showing a little bit out of the box and how people were sort of freaked out or didn't know how to respond. I think when you mentioned about something about running on the New York Times, that you did for your campaign, and people like it was so out of the ordinary that weren't you taken to court or something?
Yeah, so when I first ran for mayor, I had an opponent, and all candidates, we have to file, every week or every 2 weeks, we have to say here's what we spent and where, right? We've got to show our receipts and say this is where we're spending our money on our campaign. And my candidate was getting somewhat desperate, I think, or something, I don't know, but he was looking at my financial disclosures, and he had seen a whole bunch of ads for me on the New York Times, on the front page of the New York Times. It said, Ted for Stillwater, vote Ted, kind of thing, right? And it was great. I mean, this is what I do for a living. So I had a blast with this, right? I mean, this poor guy didn't have a prayer to try and move the needle. But so he looked at the New York Times rate card and called the New York Times, and they're like, how much does it cost to advertise on the homepage of the New York Times? And they're like, $3 million a minute or some ridiculous fee, right? And so he didn't understand how digital worked. He thought I was just advertising like globally on the New York Times on the homepage for my Ted for Stillwater political campaign. And so he reached out to the Secretary of State and filed a complaint against me for not disclosing that I had been spending millions of dollars on the New York Times ads to become the next mayor of Stillwater to make $200 a month, which prompted a call from Mark Ritchie, who was our awesome Secretary of State at the time. And he basically sat me down and said, Ted, you got to tell me how this works. And I explained to him how Google works and the display network and double click and all of those things. And Mark Ritchie was like, this is amazing. He's like, could you use that to help people get out to vote? I'm like, absolutely. So they ended up hiring me. So I got a client out of it, and I also won my election. So it was pretty fun.
So interesting point, and I wanted to use that for a second as well. Then, any advice in terms of marketers who are looking to pick up some candidates, for example, or some causes as clients? What would be the advice be in terms of how to capture them basically as a client?
You buy a bottle of Jameson. I don't know. No, I mean, they're, candidates are really fun to work with. It is really hard, but the advice I would say, I mean, they need help. They certainly need help. A lot of the best candidates, and I don't really care what side you're on, we want people that are going to work for us, that are going to be transparent, responsive. Doesn't matter what party you're from. Find those people that are running. If you have a connection with them, reach out to them. And being a professional marketer, like I think a lot of candidates, especially the state offices and stuff, don't have anybody giving them good advice right now. And so my advice would be to come up with a plan, build a proposal for them, and talk about, taking a little more commercial, traditional digital, like what we do for Polaris or Toro or whatever, and apply that to these campaigns. I would open up your mind about targeting for sure. Like all this data that these companies have, you have to use this data, you have to use this data. I really don't think it's as valuable as they lend it to be, frankly.
Yeah, that's a great point and great tip. Also, too, we're running almost short of time, but I know that they often tell politicians to go jump off a bridge, but it sounds like you're actually doing that today. Is this true?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do it. We have this beautiful historic lift bridge that was built in 1932 in downtown Stillwater. So they go up and down, and it's on the National Register. And growing up in Stillwater, everybody jumps off the bridge. You jump off the bridge into the river. It's a total rite of passage. For my whole life, I thought this was illegal. Apparently it's not. And so MnDOT, who owns the bridge, they're seeing all these kids jump off of it. And they're like, can you maybe make that not a thing you can do? And so unfortunately, we're going to have to make it illegal. And I was asked in the newspaper today, if I had ever jumped off the bridge. And I, of course, said, well, no comment to that for sure. But then Care 11 called and they said, it'd be really cool now that it's still legal to jump off this bridge. Would you mind doing it on camera at 3:00 this afternoon? And I don't think I'll be out there today, but my wife might sneak down there. She really wants to do it before they criminalize it.
So basically, you'll be watching the news to see if she does it today as well.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Any final words before we see if there's any questions? Any last advice to give?
I would say, if any of the attendees, feel free to share my contact information with anybody. If anybody wants to reach out and they have questions about this stuff, I'm more than happy to answer any questions via email or on the phone.
No, I really appreciate that too. And especially too, just the vast experience that you have in so many different ways within politics itself and as a marketer. So it's such a great background as a whole.
It's fun. It's really fun to be in politics knowing digital. It really is. There's never going to be a shortage of work.
That's a very good point. That's so true. Do we have any questions that have popped up? I'm not sure.
I don't see any.
I guess not, but people can always reach out as well.
Yeah, it's in the Q&A function.
Yep. And we'll be distributing this to everyone who signed up, so not just the attendees today, and have it available on our website as well. So Dimitri, thank you so much for today. Ted, thank you. We really appreciate your time. It's great to have you. Great conversation. And I'd wish you luck, but you don't need it. You're unopposed. So no one can take you on. So that's awesome. But thank you again. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you
for
joining.
Thank you, everybody.